Welcome. I'm Robert Ridpath, founder of Health Synergy and author of Belly Fat and Stress Reduction. In this video, we want to look at how sugar stresses you out and how it's taking over your physiology, your biochemistry, and how it's making you fat, maybe lowering your mood, making you depressed, and very unhealthy. Now, if you learn this material, it's going to change so much in your life in terms of weight management, in terms of energy and fatigue and how you go about your day, as well as your overall health and healthy aging. However, so many people are missing this key component, and it's going to contribute to your chronic struggle with weight management and weight issues. It's going to affect your mood, your fatigue, and contribute to accelerated aging. And then, once we look at these pieces of the puzzle, we're going to pull everything together and we're going to give you a step-by-step, easy to follow, solution-based program and handouts and so on to make sure you get the results you want. So what I'm going to do now is jump into the computer and we're going to look at some slides. Let's go take a look at this now. So when it comes to stress management, we have to understand that we weren't taught stress management skills by our parents, the school, or the workplace. And what's happened is maybe we've learned some inappropriate or non-supporting ways of dealing with our stress. So you need to learn and master these core fundamental skills if you want to feel in control, if you want to have more joy, more juice, and more happiness in your life. So let's look at some of the different sources of stress. Obviously, there's acute stress. You're crossing the road, a car almost hits you, that stresses you out. That's acute. Then there's workplace stress and all the hassles that may go on at work. There's mental or emotional stress. Then there's our relationship stress. There's financial stresses. And then there's excessive body fat. Yes, excessive body fat can be a stress on your body. It creates inflammation and so on. As well, there's something called toxicity. And toxicity is a stress on the body. And another stress is lack of sleep. There are others, and the one I want to focus on for today is poor eating habits, because this will become really key in controlling your stress. And this video is about how sugar stresses you out. So let's take a look. We're going to talk about this connection, this interrelationship between insulin and blood sugar. When you can't control your blood sugar, that's going to lead to elevated levels of insulin. And when you can't control insulin or you have problems with it, that's going to affect your blood sugar. So it's a two-way repeating cycle, if you will. So this is going to be a little bit technical, but I think you've seen this before, and I think you're going to really appreciate how this understanding of what's going on in your blood sugar affects so many things, your mood, your weight gain, and so on. So let's dive in. Here's a basic graph, and along the bottom it says time. Up the other axis it says blood sugar levels. And what this shows is when you eat blood sugar, your blood sugar levels go up, and then the body responds and releases insulin, and your blood sugar levels start coming down. So this is normal, healthy blood sugar response. With that, there's a corresponding normal amount of insulin that's released. And that's great. Mother Nature has designed us in such a fantastic way. However, when we have imbalances of blood sugar, this is when things get out of control, helter-skelter, if you will. Again, there's our graph, and this time you can see the dotted line. That's high glycemic foods. This is sugar spiking foods, liquid candy or sodas and pops and juices. This can be refined grains or too many bagels, candy, snack bars, potatoes, and things like that. And so that spikes our blood sugar, and you can see your blood sugar goes quite high. And then correspondingly, with this high blood sugar, you're going to get a release of insulin, but the body overcompensates and it releases too much insulin, and we call this hyperinsulinemia. Big deal. Well, the big deal is that excessive insulin actually drives your blood sugar down, which is good, but it continues to drive it down below our baseline, and this ultimately creates a problem called low blood sugar or hypoglycemia. glycemia. So low blood sugar, that's hypoglycemia. This is when you get low energy, you get fatigue, you get that kind of brain fog thing, you get sleepiness, poor cognition, problem thinking, anxiety, nervousness, low mood, even depression. And sugar cravings are generated because when your blood sugar gets that low, your nervous system and your brain says, wow, we got to power up the system. We need sugar and we need it fast. So you're trying to be strong, you're trying to be healthy, you're trying to make good choices, but this aberration in your physiology and your blood chemistry is taking over. You can't control this. You're fighting evolution and Mother Nature. You're not going to win, so you get sugar cravings, and you get sugar cravings for sweet things right now. So what are some of the contributors to poor blood sugar management? This is key to understanding all of this. Well, one of the key things is chronic stress. As you can imagine, when you are stressed, that fight or flight, if you will, your blood sugar levels are elevated. And that is to feed the working muscles. That's if the tiger was chasing you. So chronic stress drives up blood sugar. Other things, when you don't sleep, and we're talking going from 7.5 or 8 hours of sleep down to 6 hours of sleep a night, it only takes about a week when all of a sudden your blood parameters start looking like a type 2 diabetic. And lack of sleep we call sleep debt. Other things that can elevate blood sugar is something called inflammation and or toxicity, nutrient deficiencies, and the chronic intake of the sugar spiking high glycemic foods. And also modified lipid products, trans fats, but there's fewer of those in our diet these days. It used to be more of a problem, but they can still spike blood sugar. And finally, our movement patterns, or in some cases, lack of movement. All of these things contribute to elevated blood sugar. So why is this key? Well, when you're stressed, when you're not eating or sleeping right, when you're not moving enough or in the right way, or if you're in a chronically toxic environment, or if you're inflamed, your blood sugar levels start becoming askewed and they become chronically elevated. And this drives up and chronically elevates insulin. So let's take a look at what happens now with this chronic elevated insulin. So with poor blood sugar control, it can truly destroy your health. With the elevated glucose, the glucose can spill over into your nervous tissue, your brain, if you will, and that creates inflammation in your brain. And this is going to be related to Alzheimer's disease. And we'll come back and look at this later. As well, the elevated glucose, as it builds up in your blood, you have red blood cells flowing through your blood. They run into the glucose and they bond together. So we call this glycosylated or glucose bound to different proteins and other cells. And now what happens is your immune system will look at these cells and it will say, you know what, you look kind of normal, but you've got this extra leg on you or extra arm, so I better attack you. And this creates immune activation and inflammation in the body. And further, we know that elevated glucose can contribute and feed cancers as they feed specifically on glucose. Is there anything else? Yes, the elevated glucose activates and increases the response of insulin release, and that causes the body to store fat. It also prevents the mobilization and burning of fat. So now this picture's starting to get interesting. So now if you go to the family doctor and you get your blood test done and it says you have elevated cholesterol, not a good thing. So they might suggest reducing your cholesterol intake. Okay, well, how do you do that? You decreased your fat intake. Good. What are you going to replace it with? Are you going to replace it with protein or are you going to replace it with carbohydrate? A lot of people replace it with carbohydrate. And if you go to the grocery store, over the last 20 years, there's been just all these new packaging that says low-fat label. Interesting enough, the studies are starting to show that when people eat low-fat foods, or at least foods that are labeled low-fat, they tend to eat 50% more. And it's carbohydrate. And that carbohydrate is going to drive up insulin. So let's take a look at what this elevated insulin is going to do. So when you have poor insulin control, which often comes from poor blood sugar management, This promotes declining health, and the elevated insulin promotes in your kidney sodium retention, and the sodium that contributes to water retention, so your blood pressure goes up. So that's one negative strike against you, and some people might take a medication for elevated blood pressure. What else? Elevated insulin in your liver turns on enzymes that increase cholesterol biosynthesis. So you could take a drug to reduce your cholesterol, but it might be a better idea to work farther upstream and get to the root cause, which is the elevated insulin, which is driven by the high carbohydrate. So high carbohydrates actually lead to elevated cholesterol. So now you could be taking possibly 2 different medications. And the elevated insulin, as we've spoken about, it promotes fat storage. It promotes glycogen storage. It's a storage hormone. And at the same time, it inhibits fat mobilization and fat utilization for energy. And is there anything else? Yes. There are 4 key cancers that are related to elevated insulin: skin cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer in the men, and breast cancer in the women. Remember, insulin is a powerful hormone, and it tells cells to grow and divide as well. And finally, insulin can act and create hormone imbalances. What do I mean by this? For example, in your fat cells, there's an enzyme, and the enzyme is called aromatase. When insulin is elevated, it turns on this enzyme called aromatase, and aromatase takes testosterone and it converts it to estrogen. So in women, they can develop something called estrogen dominance. Their symptomology might be PMS, menstrual cramps, and things like that. But what happens in men? Because this happens in men. When men don't control their blood sugar, they can get elevated insulin, they can get hormone imbalances. Aromatase gets turned on, it siphons away and takes the testosterone, converts it to estrogen. Well, with the lower testosterone, men could get cranky, grumpy, they can lose facial hair, they can lose their muscle balance, and they're just in a very unhealthy state. So this insulin thing is really kind of key and contributes to poor, declining health. And ultimately, low energy. When you can't control your blood sugar, when you can't control your insulin levels, you ultimately have low energy. And that's what this is about. So sugar stresses you out physiologically because it contributes to this elevated insulin and all these different parameters. It's not as innocent as what we may originally think. Make sense? So in summary, chronic sugar intake leads to chronic elevated insulin that leads to all those different parameters. So stress leads to poor eating habits. It elevates blood sugars. It elevates insulin levels. And this can create a problem as well, because if we're talking about mobilizing fat and fat storage, small changes in insulin, so it doesn't take a lot, just small changes in insulin will actually prevent the body from mobilizing fat and shift your physiology to storage. So just even small amounts of simple sugars can do this. And this combination has a major impact on your health. But is there anything else? Does this story continue? Yes, it does. Low blood sugar management and the corresponding poor insulin management contributes to the loss of muscle. The loss of muscle we describe as sarcopenia, loss of flesh. Why is this important? Well, since about 2008, from the Korean sarcopenic study, they've recommended that everyone over the age of 50 be screened for sarcopenia, because the loss of muscle is related to type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and Alzheimer's disease. As a matter of fact, Alzheimer's disease is being called type 3 diabetes. And we're going to look at that in upcoming training videos. So in the next video, I want to teach you about the cephalic fat spiral. I'm going to teach you what it is and what to do to reduce it, because this thing is going to take over and control your physiology, your biochemistry, and it's going to make you eat uncontrollably. It's going to make you gain weight and fat. It's going to lower your mood and make you depressed, and it's going to make you very unhealthy. And again, once we look at all the pieces of the puzzle, Then we're going to start looking at the solutions, and we'll go over step by step, easy to follow instructions to help you reduce stress, burn belly fat, boost your energy. So how good is that? So let's go take a look at that next video now.